What was Jesus writing in the sand when he bent down to write in front of the Pharisees? In John chapter 8, the Pharisees bring to Jesus a woman who's caught in adultery and ask Jesus how he would react to her sin when the law of Moses commands that such a woman should be stoned to death. And at that moment, Jesus bends down and writes something in the dirt, a very mysterious part of Scripture that we don't know for certain what he was writing. And so I don't intend this video to be clickbaity or anything, but I want to provide my 2 cents of what I think Jesus may have been writing. And I think that this is the best supported theory about that section of Scripture, in my opinion. And so the first thing that I would like to point out, just realistically with the amount of time that actually I would like to start with asking you a question. Maybe first of all, what do you think he was writing? And pay attention to your first thoughts about that, because maybe it's an important thing, because of course Jesus doesn't write anything specifically in the New Testament. Everything that's written about him and is said about, of course, he teaches us many things in the Scriptures, and I believe the whole corpus of the Bible is given to us by Jesus. Yet he never writes anything specifically in the New Testament. Everything is given through apostles. Yet there's one moment in the Scripture where he writes something with his own hand. And I think that's significant. And so I think it's also significant what you say he might be writing. I think a lot of people today might be saying he wrote love is love, but maybe he wrote hello or something insignificant. I think that what he was writing was significant, and that he chose that moment in time to write something of significance. Yet what he was writing probably had to be somewhat short. This is totally speculative, but for the time that elapsed in that moment, what he was writing probably had to be short. A few words, maybe just a citation for a verse, your favorite Bible verse. Maybe he was citing. I've heard people speculate on this and say, well, I think he was writing this verse or that verse because this verse talks about adultery, this verse talks about Israel. Now, let's consider the context for a moment. What was going on in that moment there? Well, the Pharisees, who many of them were continually making themselves out to be enemies of Jesus, and who wanted to stone him and to put him to death for blasphemy, and they were the men at that time who were the most challenging of Jesus, because they were the religious authorities, the religious elites. And a woman in adultery. Those are the characters. And Jesus, of course. Those are the characters in this story. And the woman in adultery is a significant part of this, the meaning of my theory, because what do we know about the heart of adultery, is that behind that heart, Israel was judged because of adultery. In Ezekiel, we're shown over and over again that Israel was being brought into captivity because of their adultery. Now, there's a significant part to my theory that I think is important, is what was the language that Jesus used. Well, the language was Aramaic. And Aramaic was the language that came out of the Near East, and the Jews began speaking it during their Babylonian captivity. And there's a significant story where Aramaic words are put into the Old Testament. And when we start seeing, the moment where we start seeing Aramaic come into the Old Testament is in the book of Daniel. Daniel starts writing Aramaic after a story with Nebuchadnezzar. And the whole substance of the book of Daniel is showing that God is in control of of the world. God is sovereign and he rules over the imperial forces that govern the world. And so that as believers and followers of God, we are faithful and wise when we put our trust in God despite being being affected and impacted by the evil age. And so that despite these powers, God will remove kings and put kings in their places. And so many of Daniel's visions are surrounding that. And at one point, Daniel is literally commanded to prophesy and interpret a message for the king Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's son, when Nebuchadnezzar is told, or when Belshazzar is partying, and there are items from the temple brought to this party that Belshazzar is having, and there's drunkenness and debauchery, and in the heat of this party, there's a hand that shows up and begins writing on the wall, and it writes 4 words: many, many tekel upharsin, and those 4 words mean numbered, weighed, divided. And so those words were written in Aramaic. That was from the Aramaic language, and the 4 words were indicating that God was going to depose the ruler of that day and institute a new ruler. And that next part of what he had promised to come, which was that the Babylonians were going to be overthrown by the Medo-Persians, was going to come to fruition. Sorry, I'm trying to explain this, but it's very difficult, providing that these 4 words, I think, are possibly the words that Jesus was writing in the sand, because in all of the New Testament we only see the Son of Man writing at one point, and in the entire Old Testament we only see 4 words written in the Aramaic language, unless there's other ones that are written in the Aramaic language in the Old Testament. Let me know in the comments if you know of that. But so I also think the meaning of those words do hold significance for the rulers of that time, when Jesus was told that he didn't have the authority to judge what this woman was doing in adultery, but Jesus shows that he is the Ancient of Days with the authority to judge, and he was the same Son of Man who judged, brought about the judgment of the other nations as well. And so the adulterer, the woman caught in adultery, was a symbol of Jerusalem's adultery as well. And we know that that was the whole reason Jerusalem was brought into captivity, and Jerusalem was given this new language, and that Jerusalem's days were numbered, weighed, and then the nation of Israel was divided. Of course, that still holds true for the context of Belshazzar, but I believe that it also held true for the Pharisees at the time, who considered themselves to be the elites, the rulers, to have the last say, to be able to speak boastfully in the name of God. And the Son of Man shows in that time that he is the one who writes on the wall, so to speak, and tells the future. So I'm sure there's more behind this theory, but look into it. Like I said, just if you don't accept my theory, you don't have to. But I think that that's got the most evidence behind it as being the words that Jesus wrote. Nevertheless, we don't know for certain what he wrote, so I'm not saying that I have certainty. But let me know what you think in the comments. And if this video was helpful for you, please share it with somebody. Thank you.